little community college here in New Jersey, and I started having a lot of physical symptoms I had never had before. I felt like I had a helmet on my head all the time. I had very bad joint aches. I was having a problem with my eating and with my sleeping. And so we went to the doctors and they treated me for lupus, or they tested me for lupus and multiple sclerosis and Lyme's disease, and everything kept coming back negative, and I was getting sicker and sicker. Finally, my doctor said to me, Carol, I think you have a depression. And I said, a depression? What do I have to be depressed about? I have 3 healthy kids, a loving husband, a beautiful home, and money in the bank. And he said, you could have a predisposition or some genetic component that is making you ill. And I said, okay, so what do I do? He said, I want you to see a psychiatrist. Well, we went to the psychiatrist. She put me through a battery of tests, asking a lot of questions. And she said, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that you do have major depressive disorder. And I said, that's the good news? She said, the bad news is that medication takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to really take hold. So off we got to the pharmacy. We get the medication I need. I go home. I start these medications. I'm still going to work. Starting these medications, I'm feeling worse before better. And I started feeling other kinds of things. And other things, lack of concentration. My sleep by now was almost non-existent. I was lucky I was getting an hour or 2 sleep a night. Things were getting worse and worse. I was having a hard time because I lost my confidence. I lost my self-worth, and I felt like I'm a phony in front of my classes. How am I going to go out and speak to them? And I would spend all night preparing and looking over lectures that I had given for a dozen years. Yet I was still just sinking deeper and deeper into a depression. One night I had been up the whole night. It was a Saturday night. I had been going over lectures for Monday, and I was in my study where there were formal pictures of my family for each year. And I looked at those pictures, and I'm looking at them, and I remember my mother saying, get better for your children, get better. You got to get better for your children. And I remember thinking, I can't even get better for myself, let alone my children. I said, I can't go on like this. I can't do this anymore. I can't. I want to die. And I remember thinking, I want to die. Oh my gosh, I want to die. If I die, who's going to take care of my children? You know, who's going to do their homework with them, make their lunches, take them to their extra activities? And then I looked at my husband and said, who's going to care for my husband? And I remember thinking at that moment, they have to come with me. I went up into the bedroom. I went to speak to my husband. I sat at the end of the bed. By then it was daybreak. And I said, Russ, I can't go on like this anymore. And I can't do this. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, and so we need to get in the car, the 5 of us, and drive off the Washington Crossing Bridge. And he looked at me and he said, put your sneakers on. Let's go for a walk. What I didn't know is he wanted me out of the house. He didn't want the children to see or hear what their mother was saying. That morning, as it would be, that depression that stole my life and changed my life forever happened to bounce me into psychosis on Mother's Day, 1990. That morning when my husband, as he always did on Mother's Day, filled champagne glasses with orange juice and toasted me. And that morning he said, your mom is very sick. You know, mom's been getting sicker and sicker. And tomorrow we're going to let mom go to the hospital. But today you have to each promise me you will not get in the car. The next day was my first day in Carrier Clinic. I was in the lockdown ward for 24 days before they decided that medication was not working for me. And so they came to me and said, you're not getting better, Carol. You're in the same condition you were when you walked in here 24 days ago. So today we want to start a new treatment. And the treatment that we want to start is called electroconvulsive therapy, better known as shock therapy. Now, I don't know about you, but I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And that ingrained in my head that I would be a vegetable or I would never be able to go back to the college. But what was really interesting is I was more afraid of what other people would think. And so one empathetic nurse came to me and said to me, Carol, you have a family that is here every single day. Your mother and father want their child back. Your children want their mother back. You've got to do something. What are you so afraid of? And I said, I'm more afraid of what other people will think. Will my neighbors let my kids come back into my house? Would the dean let me come back into the college? And she said something very powerful to me. Carol, it can be your secret. Secrets harbor shame and guilt. Now, I did have ECT, and it gave me back my life. And I was released from that hospital on day 38. And I went back to teaching. And I went back to living a life. And then 4 years later, the beast hit me again, brought me to my knees. And this time I was in the hospital for 24 days and had more ECT treatments. And then went back to my life again. And then in 1999, I had 2 psychotic breaks and more ECT treatments and more days in the hospital. And then I woke up and said, I am sick of being sick. The doctors cannot keep me well. I've got to find wellness on my own. So I'm here to tell you about what I found to keep myself mentally well and to help others do the same. All right, so what I found is that self-care is not a luxury. It's a necessity. And stress is part of life, and finding balance and perspective will create mental wellness, adding to your level of happiness and peace. We have the next slide. You'll see what my objectives are for today. And we're looking at what's the difference between mental illness and mental wellness. I'm going to really distinguish between those things. I'm going to talk about the symptoms of depression and emotional stress, because it is definitely, we're under more emotional stress with the pandemic than we have been in years. I'm going to be talking about what's the kind of a routine? How do I incorporate this into my daily life? I'm telling you, self-care is a necessity, not a luxury. So we need to be working on mental wellness every day. For me, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and I'll be talking throughout on the things that I do every single day. I'll also talk about the importance of gratitude, personal forgiveness, and resilience. Those 3 things make a big difference in how you can live more mentally well. Next slide, please. On the next slide, Christina has already talked to us about some of the statistics, and these statistics came out of a survey done by Career Cost. And they're telling us that your profession, meeting professionals or meeting planners, are the 5th leading job of stress in the world, right up there with firefighters and law enforcement. Yet, 38% don't want to ask for help. 15 don't feel like they could ask for help. And we know that 71% of your colleagues are suffering. In the general population, it's 1 in 4 Americans struggle with depression. It's the leading one cause and disability worldwide, globally, more prevalent than heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. And yet we're not talking openly and getting the treatment that we need. There were some new statistics that just came out within the last week about the pandemic. They're telling us 1 in 4 people in America report feeling down and depressed and feeling hopeless very often. 41% of people feel burnt out from the pandemic, drained or exhausted from trying to work from home, trying to have children learn from home. And so it's added stress. 1 out of 3 employees, 37%, have said that they are feeling they need help, yet only 7% are getting help. And what's holding people back from getting help? Stigma. Stigma that they're going to feel like they're judged, stigma that it may impact their career, stigma that others will not understand. Now, next slide, please. What are we looking at as the 3 top stressors in just the general world? The 3 top stressors are job, finances, and family. And the pandemic has had an impact on all 3 of those factors. But meeting professionals or planners, the stress factors that you have are endless, from physical demands to deadlines, to training, to working in the public eye, to dealing with potential disasters, to working now with technology that we can't always depend on. And so stress factors add up on a daily basis, because stress comes down to your perception of your degree of control. When we feel like we have to control everything and anything around us, it adds stress, and stress brings with it cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that comes with stress. And because of the stress that we're under today, each of us have what I call a cortisol drip. It never ceases. You see, when you have big trauma, you get a deluge of cortisol, but then it stops. But when you're under constant stress, as we have been with the pandemic, worried about our health, worried about our children's health, our families, worried about our jobs, worried about the economy, worried about the different racism things that are happening, all of those things are adding more and more stress to us, which never allow that cortisol drip to cease. And because of that, we're in a more impactful, anxiety-ridden existence, which is not the best for not only your heart, but also for other conditions that it causes. So let's take a look at how you can recognize the stress symptoms. Next slide, please. Next slide. Some of these, if maybe some of you have already felt some of this: fear and anxiety, their concentration, being distracted, not being or what I call brain fog. That happens to me always when I'm thinking. A lack of energy because that cortisol is dripping all day. Chronic pain, that's what I started with, muscle aches and joint aches. People are having more headaches than they've ever had. Migraines are on the rise. It deals with it could deal with irritable bowel syndrome, as well as fatigue and insomnia. For me, insomnia is the first ticket for me to say, a flare that goes up for me to say something's not right, whether I need a medication change or I need to speak to a therapist. But that insomnia for me, if I have more than 3 days in a row where I can go to sleep, but then I get up and I have racing thoughts for the rest of the night, that is definitely a siren for me that I need to really look at my self-care in the moment. Now, emotional signs of stress are irritability, apathy, a change in your sleep. Also, interest in your job dwindles. So when you start to feel any of these things for a prolonged period, anybody can feel this for a day, a couple of hours, even 2 days. But when you start walking in this and on an everyday, daily basis, you need to really start thinking about, what am I doing for stress relief? And am I heading down the lane of depression? So if we move to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about depression. It's very real. It is a medical issue. And it's interesting because people with depression and as I did myself, I remember when I had my first depression, I felt like I was damaged goods. I thought to myself, why can't I will myself out of this? And what I found was you can't will yourself out of depression. There needs to be some coping skills. And what I also realized that it's so misunderstood, and we are in a society that wants to take a pill to just get rid of things. But what I did learn is that pills don't teach skills. In order for you to be able to maintain and live with for me with major depressive disorder, I needed to learn more than taking pills or shock treatment or even going to a therapist. If we don't take care of depression, it can be potentially dangerous. And we see suicide our rates are rising more than they've ever been. However, we know that it is manageable. 80% of people with major depressive disorder go back to work with the right treatment. 65% with people with bipolar disorder go back to work with the right treatment. It is treatable, but it's a chronic illness that you will live with. Now, people sometimes will have a depression for something that's happened in their life, the loss of a person, or grieving, or a loss of a job. That's a situational depression. I'm talking about if you have a genetic component, towards depression, then it is an illness that you'll address or need to be addressed for the rest of your life. Next. I often say that mental illness is an equal opportunity condition. Females and males, young and old, all races and religions. Interestingly enough, we're finding depression coming down younger and younger. Children as 4 and 5 are now getting are having depression. And we know that the elderly, it rises. It also rises with other conditions. People with Parkinson's disease, people with MS. Depression is one of the by symptoms of those diseases. But mental illness, it's just not selective, and it can happen at any time. Now, for me, doctors tell me that I was a late bloomer at the age of 40. That was pretty late for me to have it. But when we look back on my life, and when we started to really look back on my life, I was an anxious kid, because depression and anxiety are co-companions. And so you don't usually see one without the other. So it was ultimately I would probably become depressed because of all of the anxiety that I had as a child. We look back, and I will tell you that when we look back over my life, back in the 70s, when they didn't really talk about it very much, I had postpartum depression after my third child. But when I went to the doctor and said I didn't feel the same as I felt with my other children, I remember the doctor saying, "Carol, go home, have a glass of wine, take a soak in the tub, and make love to your husband." The only person that felt better was my husband. And so depression is real, and if we treat it as a real illness, we get a different response. If we'll move to the next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. I came up with the distinction between mental illness and mental wellness, and we're here to talk about mental illness. Mental illness is an appointment you make with your doctor or your medical provider, but mental wellness is a commitment you make to yourself. And that's a commitment I've made to myself for the last 18 years, that I will be the one to keep myself well, not the doctor. But even if you don't struggle with depression, you still have mood swings. You still have ups and downs of life and trials and tribulations. So you need to look at your mental wellness as much as we do our physical wellness. You know, there are times, and I'm sure where you have felt this, that you needed a mental health day. You needed a day to de-stress. If you had a bad cold, you wouldn't go into the office, maybe you wouldn't go to work, maybe you would do something for it. Maybe you would take Mucinex, or you would take a cold medication. But yet, when you're feeling overwhelmed with your emotions, and when you're feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, You don't do anything to help you through that. That's what mental wellness is. It's being aware of how you're feeling emotionally. Are you tied up in knots? What are you doing to release some of that anxiety and that stress? On to the next page, because these are the things that I have found the 3 keys to mental wellness. Just eat, move, and sleep. And you've heard about these things for physical illnesses, but they also work for us for mental wellness. So let's look at some of these things. All right, eating. They talk a lot about, a lot of us without realizing ingest a lot of caffeine. Less caffeine and more protein. Less caffeine, more water. Most of us don't drink enough water, and yes, water gives us energy. It gives us clarity of thought. It gives us it will help you. You won't need the caffeine jolt that you need in mid-morning or mid-afternoon if you're hydrating yourself enough. That hydration. About 3 years ago, I worked with a nutritionist on my eating habits and also on hydration. And I was absolutely astounded that it took, for me to become hydrated at a level the nutritionist wanted me to be, it took me almost 3 months. And she had me drinking half of my weight in ounces of water. I felt like I was going to float away. But what I did see was I saw an increase in my clarity of thought. I felt an increase in the energy and an increase to do whatever I wanted to do by feeling so much better. They're talking heavily. I also learned a lot. One of the things that I did for my initial move in from illness to wellness was at the age of my late 50s, I started walking long distances. And I realized, and I learned a lot about protein during that time, where when I was training for some of these half marathons, I had done 2 half marathons and 1 full marathon. I walked them, I didn't run them. And I always had a little pouch of walnuts or almonds. And when I was getting depleted of my energy in those trainings, and even during the actual marathons, I would eat 4 or 5 almonds or walnuts, and I all of a sudden got a burst of energy. And that really stuck in my head, because during the day at my office, in my own office, I have a little container of nuts that when I'm starting to have a letdown of getting tired and I'm losing my energy, to eat a few nuts made a big difference in my clarity of thought and my ability to continue on my day. Also under the eating, more plant-based foods. It's the same as our physical illness. We need a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, and on the eating also, limiting the amount of alcohol. I heard an interesting statistic just yesterday on something that I attended that talked about how depleting it can be. 1 or 2 glasses of wine or so, okay, but anything above that, it depletes us. From eating, I'm going to talk about moving. And with the moving, even small bursts of exercise. I've read a couple of articles. Even if you can't exercise for 30 minutes, to do 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If you can do 10 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, those bursts of exercise will help you in the moving. Today we're sitting down. I don't know about you, but I'm on Zoom calls much of my day. Are you getting up in between Zoom calls? They're telling us that we should be setting our phones as an alarm for every 90 minutes to get up and maybe just march in place for a little bit. Why? We need that movement. That movement increases energy. In my office, when I have a brain freeze, if I'm writing, I do a lot of writing for blogs and also for my books. And when I get a brain freeze, I have a weighted hula hoop in my office that I actually hula hoop for just 3 minutes. What a difference. A little bit of energy or a little bit of movement will provide in your energy. Hiking, dancing, the bottom line is get out of your chair, get off of the couch, and move. In the book, The Spirit of Kaizen, there's a little book, a Japanese book called The Spirit of Kaizen. In that book, it says if you want to make a new habit, all you need to do is make small little incremental steps. And so if you don't exercise and all of a sudden you want to bring more movement into your life, it talked about if you watch a TV program, every time that you watch TV, when a commercial comes on, stand up and march in place. And as soon as the commercial is done, sit down and enjoy the program. The next commercial, get up and march in place. You know the spirit of Kaizen is starting to take over when you've just recognized you've just marched in place for a whole TV program. So that movement, very, very necessary. All right. So we're gonna just real quick right now, I'd like you all to stand up, if you will, where you are, and march in place for just a couple of seconds. Ready? Come on, everybody stand up. Let's do it. Okay, you've been sitting already, for some of us, for over half an hour. So let's just march. Just get your legs moving and marching for a couple of minutes, and just marches and realizing that we need this movement. We need the movement to keep us going and to develop our energy, but also more important, to help us with our concentration. All right, let's sit down again. Feels good to get out of that chair, doesn't it? Yeah, it feels good. And it doesn't have to be, as I said to you, 10-minute bursts make a big difference. 10 minutes bursts, which moves us on to sleep. We know that 70% of the adult population is sleep deprived. And if you're a new parent, you know what sleep deprivation feels like. And our body needs rest. All right. You would not be at your best without the kind of sleep or rest that you need. And what we are finding is that there needs to be a wind down time for you to rest. And with the wind down time, they're saying get off of technology, get off of the TV at least 30 minutes before you go into that bedroom. And wherever it is that you're sleeping. And what they're finding out is that the room needs to be dark and it needs to be cool. So if your heat is up too much in your home, drop it a few degrees in the evening. So you'll have a better night's rest. But those devices have to get turned off. I was on a call yesterday called Chats with Carol that I delivered for NAMI. And one woman was saying to me, I know that I'm on my telephone too much, but I just can't seem to get off that telephone. That I'm all on technology. I'm on my iPad. I'm way too much. I actually said to her, do yourself a favor and set an alarm on your phone so that you're getting off 30 minutes before you go into that bedroom to sleep. So how much are you sleeping? You need to take what I call take a little pulse on your sleep hygiene. How much are you sleeping? They're saying 8 hours. Some of my executives, when I ask this question about sleep, they're telling me they're living on 4 and 5 hours of sleep a night. It's not enough. Your body regenerates itself while you sleep and gives you the necessary rest in order for you to bring your best self to the next day. So I want you to think about your sleep hygiene and how can I get some better sleep? And a lot of it is turning off the TV earlier. It's setting some boundaries on how much technology you're going to use in the evening, and really to stop working at least 30 minutes before you start to calm yourself down. So out of eat, move, and sleep, I want you to make a mental note is which one of those three things do you need to start working on or thinking about a little differently. All right, on to the next slide, please. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about the 3 R's and give you some strategies, some specific strategies that you can use to increase your mental wellness. I want to talk about recharging, and that's about investing in yourself so that you can bring your best self. I want to talk about recovering, and I want to talk about rebounding. And rebounding is the self-support and care that you give yourself. I also want you to recognize that health is the sum of many years. Okay, what we do to our body for years ultimately gives us something out in future years. So you need to think about starting now, and it's never too late to start thinking about your mental wellness. On to the next page, please. On the next page, we're going to look at some mental recharging things that you do. Journaling is something that has worked very well for me. I journal 1 page every single day, 7 days a week, 1 page to get out anything that's clogging my thought process, the chatter that's clogging it. This past week, I took a session, a grieving session called The Apprentice of Sorrow. I had one of my youngest sister passed away suddenly in February, and I'm dealing with some grieving. And so I wanted to get some professional help to walk me through this process. And one of the things he had us do during the session, which was incredible, was he had us journal for 10 minutes. And he said, don't take your pen off the paper. I don't care what you write. If you don't even know what to write, just write, I don't know what to write. And he said, I want you to journal for 10 minutes, and then we'll take a look at what it is that you've written. And it was interesting. He gave us what I call starting points, or he called them shuttles that we could start writing with. Things like, I remember, or I wish someone would ask me, or my tears, or I mourn. I could not believe what came out of me in that 10 minutes of just journaling, and the relief that I felt after I had read what I had written. So journaling works wonderfully if you've never done it. Also drawing, which when you draw, there's something that happens with the creativeness of your brain that takes you away from where you are in the moment, which is a very important thing to do. Or meditation, whether you're using yoga or meditation. And 2 very good meditative apps that you can get for free. One is called Calm, CALM.com. The other one is Headspace.com. Both of those are free apps that will put you through 3, 5, and even longer meditations. Hobbies are a good way to recharge because you lose yourself in hobbies. One of the things that I do that helped me, and a hobby that I have, is actually coloring. That has been a godsend to me as far as recharging my energy and just losing myself for a few minutes. So that makes a big difference. Time with friends is a recharge. A telephone call, checking in on people, things that are recharging you. Music, a very big recharge. One of the 4 natural stress tranquilizers. It's music. It's can I even think of all 4 now? We'll come back to my four. But music that you like. It has to be music that you like. But also things like laughter can recharge you. So comedy and sitcoms are good because they release endorphins into our system. Also nature, getting out. And I noticed earlier when people were signing on, somebody was outside. Sitting outside can make a difference. Just getting in nature. Gardening, a vacation, a mental health day. All these things are recharging. They recharge our energy. They recharge our mental acuity. They charge our spirits, and we all need a little bit of that, especially now with what's happening. So from recharge, we move to recover. So we're next slide. And in recover, I want to talk about self-care and self-support. And so positive self-talk. Research tells us we need 3 to 5 positive comments to overcome 1 negative comment. I want you to start paying attention to how you speak to yourself. Or do you speak to yourself the way you would speak to your best friend? Are you critical? Are you self-critical? It makes a big difference on rebounding and recovering. How empathetic are you to yourself? Would you be the same way to someone if they felt that were feeling down? What are you using for vehicles of inspiration? Are you looking at quotes? Are you reading inspiring things? For me, at lunch time, and my office is in home, like many of your offices are, and working from home, and I go downstairs into my kitchen, and I spend a good 40 minutes in the kitchen taking some time, and what I'm reading are always inspirational things. I read guideposts, which are little stories of inspiration that inspire me to go back into my office for the afternoon and be uplifted. Having an attitude of gratitude makes a big difference in our recovery, in our mental health recovery. And so we all have trials and tribulations, but we're here, as one of us said on this morning when they were checking in, is that we're here to talk about today. And so one of the things that I've done, I read a book called Simple Abundance. Oh my goodness, years and years ago, back in the 90s, I read that book. And one of the things that they recommended was keeping a gratitude journal. And so every day, 7 days a week, I write 3 to 5 things I'm grateful for from the day before, which then sets me up for a more positive, um, blessed day. Blessed day. And then there's something called boundary setting. You know, what are you setting your boundaries to keep yourself well? Are you spending too much time with negative people, which then actually drain your energy out? So setting boundaries from I'm willing to only work until 7 o'clock at night. I'm willing to only do setting a boundary that's shutting that TV off by 10 o'clock in the evening will make a big difference. So out of these things, positive self-talk, giving yourself more empathy, finding ways to get inspiration, developing an attitude of gratitude, and setting boundaries, which one could you do starting this afternoon? From there, let's move to the last R. And the last R, oh, no, before we go to the last R, we're going to talk a little bit about resilience, because I really, really like this quote when it says that resilience is the invincible quality and allows some people to be knocked down by life and come back at least as strong as before. Rather than letting difficulties or failures overcome them and drain them, resolve that they find a way to rise from the ashes. It's interesting. My youngest sister, Alexis, she would say to me every time I got sick and went back into the hospital, she would say to me, Carol, you come back stronger than you went in. And with each depressive episode, you've not only did you learn more lessons, but you became even more resilient to coming back to mental wellness. And so resilience, and we hear it so much today, is necessary because all of us are being knocked down by all of the things that are happening worldwide. But one of the things that we can do, because we've been born with the bounce back ability, which is what I want to talk about now, about rebounding. So if you'll move to the next, we do bounce back. And that positive exchange really makes a big difference. Mindset. Watch your mindset. Are you becoming a resident of Pity City? You're looking at, oh my gosh, how are we going to get through this? The future, we don't know what the future is going to look like. So what is your mindset? The more that you stay in the moment, the more you're in the now, because your past is your history. The future is a mystery. Today is today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. You need to stay as much as you can in the present moment, because that's the only thing you have to live is in the present moment. When we waste too much rehashing the past, we can never get to our future to begin with. And then constantly reframing, hitting the pause button. I hear myself say something negative. Let me reframe that, what I've just said. Instead of saying, oh, you know what? I'll never be able to do this. I'll never get through this. Oh, let me reframe that. I'm doing my best to get through this. So looking for those words make such a difference, because the words that we put out into the universe are the things that we manifest back in our lives. So be very cognizant of what words you're using when you talk about yourself and what you're able to do. And then lessons learned, rebounds. You know, I've got here before. Gone through this before. I got through it. I'll get through it again. What are the lessons that we're learning? You see, there are 3 D's to success. There's desire. We want to be successful. We want to be able to get through what we're going through in the minute. There's drive. We have the motivation to do it. The 3rd D is discipline. Do we have the discipline to follow through day after day after day to keep us on track for our own mental wellness? So out of those 4, the ability to bounce back, looking at my mindset, reframing, and then going back to lessons learned and recognize I did get through this, I'll do it again. Which one do you need to pay more attention in keeping your own mental wellness in check? Write it down. Which brings us to just a summary of all the things that we've spoken about. So first thing is, you've got to acknowledge that, meaning professionals and planners, you have a stressful job. Watch for the symptoms. Acknowledge your symptoms and do something about it, which is the next one. Get assistance from medical professionals. I will tell many of the executives that I coach, one of the things that I'll say to them, the best thing you can give yourself is a couple of therapy sessions to work through some of the things that are thwarting your future. Know that depression is manageable and treatable. It's good news. And some of you might be just having some situational depression, but doing some of the things that we've talked about, the eat, move, and sleep, can help considerably. Remember the 3 keys that I've just talked about: eat, move, and sleep. And then also recall the 3 R's: recharge, recover, and rebound. Now, how many of you have ever heard that knowledge is power? Well, in my book, knowledge is not power, it's only potential. Knowledge only becomes power when you use it, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So now I want to be open for questions, Christina. So what questions might you have in the moment?
We have one question, and the question is, what are some active steps that you can take if depression is hereditary or runs in the family?
Thank you for that. It's a question because we found that mine was hereditary. There was a genetic component, and I have my 3rd son struggles with depression, was challenged, and so do I have a grandson also that has some depression, and a granddaughter with anxiety. What can you do? You can be aware of that. You can be aware of it, and you can work on your mental wellness as something that you can actually work towards. And that means making sure that you're getting the rest that you need. Exercise, some exercise, they tell us, will help us as much as an antidepressant will help us. And if you find yourself slipping into any kind of a depression or that's lasting, now everybody gets depressed. I'm not talking about a sadness. I'm talking about something that is impacting your ability to live life, to enjoy life. If you find yourself isolating, that is is something that you might want to acknowledge and see, get yourself out there more. But if you have a genetic component, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it. It doesn't mean that depression will grab you, but it's at least you acknowledge that you'll be more fine-tuned to listening to any of the flares that show up in your life. sleeplessness, some of the emotional things that I talked about earlier, and some of the physical things that I talked about earlier. But just be aware of it, and keep a flare. No different than when we have a genetic component to diabetes or to heart disease. I mean, both of my parents died with heart disease, so I'm very aware that I need to watch my blood pressure and things of that nature. So it's the same thing. If you have a genetic component towards cancer, you make sure you get your different tests, and you so it's the same kind of thing. It's not different. And the more we normalize that mental health is as important as physical health, then we will acknowledge what we need to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And one last question. How do we help a family or friend that is experiencing depression?
Oh, thank you for asking that one. You can support them by telling them that you're there for them, that you don't know how it feels to where they are, but you want to walk along with them for this. You want to send a get well card, no different than you would send a get well card for a physical illness. I used to say my sister had cancer, and when she had a bout, she'd get brownies and casseroles. Well, when I had depression, nobody came around. And so it's just acknowledging that they're ill, and that you're not afraid of them, and that you care for them, and let them know that uh, you're there to they to support them in any way that they would like you to be supported. I have a very good friend who's in a very bad depression right now, and all he says to me is, just call me and let me know, that I know that you're out there, even though we can't see each other right now. Let me know that you're there for me. So that would be one of the best things that you could do, is to show them that you care.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. And we don't have any other further questions for you, Carol.
Okay.
You want to just share some information, your books, your
Sh-
website?
yeah, sure. I'll share information. If you go back to, oh no, I'll just share it. I'll